Right now, a shock to the whole world. Trump suddenly left the G7 summit, causing a major scandal. The US leader made incredible statements that blew up the internet. Shock! The Ukrainian armed forces have surrounded thousands of Russians. Revenge for Kyiv. This is a complete collapse. A killer drone in action. Unique footage. Israel helped Ukraine. The elimination of a general in Iran peace is the end for the Shaheds. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Shock! Trump led the G7 summit. A major scandal. The US leader made unexpected statements, and this is truly shocking. But that's not all. Trump harshly attacked Macron. The French leader revealed the real reason for the US president's departure, and Trump just lost it. What were they trying to hide behind the scenes at the summit? Watch this.
Russian President Vladimir Putin would not have invaded Ukraine if the Gate had not excluded Russia from its ranks in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. This was stated by US President Donald Trump.
Trump is clearly just stalling for time. In other words, it's clear that he made a deal with Putin to stall for time in Putin's interests, and that's exactly what he's doing.
After creating a slew of newsworthy topics for discussion, Trump left the G7 summit a day earlier than scheduled, supposedly due to the escalation of the conflict in the Middle East.
In reality, there was no escalation in the Middle East at all. Nothing much changed. Even though Trump was spewing some angry statements, but those statements led to nothing. And I think that Trump simply knew that Russia was preparing a large-scale attack on Ukraine. And naturally, after this attack, in the context of his numerous previous statements, everyone would be raising the issue of sanctions against Russia, about the need to put pressure on Putin. But Trump doesn't like that idea. So he simply ran away. He ran away from uncomfortable conversations.
Trump is not going to impose sanctions while Russia continues to spill blood.
Europe is talking about it, but hasn't done anything yet. Let's first see how they actually do it. Don't forget, sanctions are very expensive for us. It's not just about signing a piece of paper. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Sanctions are no simple matter.
According to the US president, for him, signing a trade agreement with the UK is enough. However, Trump refused to sign a joint statement on de-escalating the conflict between Iran and Israel.
At the moment, Trump's position on the Middle East conflict is confusing. He alternates between calling for negotiations, saying the deal is on the table, and then saying people should evacuate from Tehran and so on. In essence, Trump is just putting out contradictory messages. So in reality, it's clear that he simply doesn't have any coherent position.
Official Tehran has informed the representatives of Arab countries that it is ready to return to the negotiating table, provided that the US does not join the Israeli strikes, sources told the Wall Street Journal. Messages were also conveyed to Israel, stating that both sides are interested in limiting violent actions. Let us recall that Donald Trump himself had previously insisted on negotiations. But while Trump is busy with his imaginary world, yet another nuclear competitor is emerging for his country. China has increased its nuclear arsenal to a record level and has built hundreds of missile silos near the border with Russia. Over the past year, the Chinese army has acquired about 100 new nuclear warheads, and compared to 2020, its arsenal has nearly doubled. Experts report that by 2030, China will most likely reach parity with the United States and Russia in the number of strategic nuclear weapon delivery systems.
Israel has carried out a strike that saved Ukraine. Tel Aviv has done something that could help Kyiv. Israel's elimination of Iranian generals is supposed to break the deadly chain through which Tehran was supplying Moscow with its Shahed drones and their components. A strike on Iran's military-industrial complex. How devastating are its losses? All the details coming up.
They struck Tehran, but the consequences were felt in Moscow itself. The day before, Israel confirmed the elimination of several high-ranking Iranian military officials as a result of a massive airstrike.
This is epic. Dozens of generals have been sent to hell.
At night, the intelligence department determined that the top command of the Revolutionary Guard Air Force was gathering in an underground headquarters to prepare for an attack on the state of Israel. Air Force fighter jets attacked the headquarters where the commander of the Revolutionary Guard Air Force was located. Among the eliminated military personnel is Iranian General Amir Ali Hajizadeh. According to Israeli intelligence, he was the one who brought much grief to Ukraine. Hajizadeh was directly involved in supplying the Kremlin with Iranian drones and their components.
Some components were still supplied by Iran to the territory of the Russian Federation in order to complete already finished models of Shaheds It is important to understand that such strikes by Israel against Iran can have significant consequences for us.
In an instant, Putin lost one of his main tools of terror against Ukrainian cities. No matter how much the Kremlin boasts about import substitution or renames Iranian Shaheds as Russian Gerans, the internal components are still supplied to Moscow from Tehran, and only by the personal order of the eliminated commander of the Islamic Republic's guards.
Indeed, the moment right now is the most favorable. Iran is not in the best situation, not in the best condition after the fall of its proxy regime in neighboring Syria, as well as the strikes that have been carried out against Hamas and Hezbollah, which have also been significantly weakened. And obviously, Israel may very well take advantage of the current moment.
Destroyed was
significant infrastructure, missile production, air defense systems, and much more inside Iran itself was destroyed specifically by Israel. And therefore, Iran's military capabilities to carry out strikes have been greatly weakened.
Military analysts are confident that the Kremlin is already experiencing the negative consequences of the Israeli special operation, but Ukraine will feel the positive effect in the coming days. They are heavily dependent on the supply of certain components, which is why we see varying numbers of launches at night. And it will only get worse from here. For Moscow, that's for sure. Military experts are sure. Already the day after the elimination of the Iranian generals, Israeli air forces struck a factory producing Shaheds and also bombed a local company that manufactures almost all radar systems in Iran. Now, following the shortage of components for the Shaheds, the Kremlin will also be deprived of most of the other Iranian weaponry that Tehran has been steadily supplying to Russia in recent years.
Let me remind you that Iran supplied Russia not only with these, but also with artillery ammunition, man-portable air defense systems, anti-tank systems, helmets and body armor. A lot of different things were delivered.
The fewer means Iran has to kill Ukrainians, the better. If Israel is the one to make this happen, that's wonderful. If Israel destroys all the entire military potential of Tehran, so that as few Ukrainians as possible are killed, that's what I support. It would be great if Israel, using remote methods, F-35s, destroys all these factories producing Shaheds, ammunition, shells, components for ballistic missiles, and so on, and so on, and so on. That way, fewer Ukrainians will be killed. What's wrong with that? Supposedly it's bad. Supposedly it's bad if Moscow has fewer of these resources. Well, even if it's just by 1%, even if it's just 1%, well, that 1% could mean one person. That person won't die in Ukraine. So why can't we approve of the destruction of Iran's military potential?
However, it must be acknowledged that the Russian opposition figure is seriously underestimating the Kremlin's dependence on its allies in Tehran. Halting arms supplies to the Kremlin could play a cruel trick on Putin and his army. Without Iranian drones, Putin loses a crucial tool for exerting pressure and terror in Ukraine, while Tehran in turn is left without Russian military technologies that Moscow generously shares in exchange for weaponry.
In exchange for supplying Iranian Shaheds, which are currently being used to strike peaceful Ukrainian cities, Iran received Su-35 fighter jets from Russia. Russia also apparently may have shared additional technologies. However, there is still a lot that remains unclear here. There are also suspicions that Iran may have transferred a certain number of ballistic missiles to Russia for strikes against Ukraine.
So, with a single strike, the Israeli forces managed to hit two representatives of the axis of evil on the world map at once. And what is even more important, according to the IDF, this is only the beginning of a larger-scale operation to undermine both the Iranian and Russian dictatorships.
Incredible! A Ukrainian FPV drone has accomplished the unthinkably fatal strike against Russian intelligence. What makes this moment unique is that this stunning episode was filmed by another Ukrainian armed forces drone. You will see extremely rare visual evidence of the incredible work our units are doing to counter drones. Meanwhile, Trump is shutting down the levers of pressure on Russia. The media is sounding the alarm. What does this mean for Ukraine and the world? We will show the truth about what is happening on the front lines. Details, figures, and footage right now.
Rare footage from the Donetsk region. The moment a Russian reconnaissance UAV or land was destroyed by Ukrainian FPV drone was captured. Notably, this episode was filmed by another drone of the armed forces of Ukraine, which gives us rare visual evidence of the successful work of the anti-drone units. The operation was carried out by the soldiers of the 1129th Belotserkovsky Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment. Olgis arm a new Ukrainian weapon against Mavics. A new mobile electronic warfare system, Olgis AM, has appeared in Ukraine, capable of effectively jamming DJI Mavic-type drones in a full 360-degree radius. Its main feature is remote control. The antenna can be adjusted from cover without risking lives. The system was developed by a Ukrainian company with the support of the Brevion platform. They helped navigate the codification process and adapt the system to real frontline conditions involving military personnel in testing. Olgis IM is not the first development in this series. Previously, the company introduced the Olgis 1, T, X and XM systems, which are specialized in countering FPV drones across different frequency ranges. A massive attack on Ukraine and Kyiv, 440 drones, missiles and debris. Air defense shot down most of them, but there are casualties and destruction. On the night of June 17, Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine experienced one of the largest air attacks since the start of the full-scale war. In total, Russia launched 440 strike UAVs, of which 428 were neutralized. 262 of them were shot down, and another 166 were lost by location. This was reported by Yuri Ikhnat, head of the communications department of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, during a television marathon. In addition to drones, the occupiers used missiles such as Kinkhal, Hara-101, Hara-59, Hara-Varvaravai, H-69, and also deployed cluster munitions. A large number of fragments were found at the impact sites. An especially powerful strike was delivered against the capital, around 280 drones. These are Shaheds. The rest are decoys, like parodies. UAVs enter the city from different directions, including along the Dnipro River as well as from the east and west. The enemy tried to overload the air defense and break through the protection in different parts of the city. 2 Ka-47M2 Kinzhal missiles did not reach their targets. Out of 16 Kach-101 cruise missiles, one hit a residential building. The consequences are catastrophic. 15 were shot down. 4-caliber missiles in the Zaporizhia direction were not intercepted. Another 3 were lost by location. Strikes were recorded overall in 10 regions of the country, and 34 populated areas suffered damage due to falling debris from downed UAVs and missiles. In many cases, debris hit residential infrastructure. Despite the successful work of air defense, the risks for the civilian population remain extremely high. Just over Kyiv alone last night, the enemy launched 175 attack drones, more than 14 cruise missiles, and at least 2 ballistic missiles. According to Reuters, the Trump administration disbanded the task force that was pressuring Russia. And against the backdrop of recent news, this development looks even worse. The administration of US President Donald Trump shut down the interagency working group that was developing a strategy for increased pressure on Russia in order to promote a peaceful resolution to the war in Ukraine. Reuters reported this on June 17th, citing its own sources. According to journalists, the initiative, which began in the spring, gradually lost momentum. The members of the working group concluded that President Trump is not interested in taking a tougher stance toward the Kremlin. Sources noted that the head of the White House, who had previously promised to quickly stop Russia's war against Ukraine, has recently shown frustration with the lack of results and has begun to talk about the possibility of the US withdrawing from the peace process. About 3 weeks ago, according to 3 senior officials, a final blow was dealt to this initiative. The administration dismissed most members of the US National Security Council, including the entire team working on the war in Ukraine. This effectively made it impossible for the group to continue its work. Reuters notes that it is not reliably known who exactly initiated the termination of the group's activities. At the same time, the scale of the personnel changes in the NSC indicates that this decision was systemic. The agency emphasizes that the dissolution of the working group may heighten concerns among US allies in Europe, especially on the eve of an important NATO summit. Trump's restrained rhetoric toward Moscow and his reluctance to publicly express unequivocal support for Ukraine are causing concern amid Russia's increased aggression. That's all for today. Tune in tomorrow for more news.
With direct fire, Ukrainian soldiers destroyed an occupier's shelter in the Pokrovsk direction. The soldiers know that they continue to deliver precise strikes on enemy positions, demoralizing the personnel of the Russian army.
Turning on the drone, we wait for it to charge with the controller. We check the video feed, we check the arm, and if everything is good, we take off.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian soldiers repelled the most attacks by the occupiers, specifically in the Pokrovsk direction. There, the invaders made 32 unsuccessful attempts to push the defenders from their positions.
The Pokrovsk direction was important for the Russian Federation last year as well. We expected, let's put it this way, let's start from the beginning. Based on the pace of the Russian army's advance, we expected that around September or October, battles for the city of Pokrovsk itself could already begin right there on the ground. Entering the city, assault groups, everything as it should be. But again and again, thanks to the Ukrainian command, thanks once more to the Ukrainian military and to Mr. Drapatov personally, the commander who was appointed specifically for this direction, it was possible to stop, to bog down the Russian offensive.
Another 19 assaults have been repelled since the beginning of the day in the Novopavlivka direction, 14 in the Toretsk direction, and 17 in the Severoslobodshansky and Kursk directions. As military experts note, the enemy continues to send its soldiers into so-called meat assaults in these sectors of the front, as well as in the direction of Sumy, and is suffering significant and in some places even catastrophic losses.
The enemy did not really think about losses before, and probably does not think about them even today, because they try to attack even if with small groups, many assault groups of up to 7 or 10 people. These are sabotage and reconnaissance groups that operate quite actively, and the forces that were gathered at this location, about the size of the combined army certainly do not allow the enemy to advance further, let alone attack the city of Sumy.
Ukrainian soldiers posted footage of the defeat of one of the so-called meat grinder Russian attacks. They noted that this time the Russians sent bikers into the assault. The result was destroyed motorcycles and the entire assault group wiped out. Spring had finally come to the land, bringing with it a gentle warmth and new life. Beasts and birds were weaving about, filling the air with movement and song. Only fascism today, cold and unwelcome, was out of luck on this earth, finding no place to thrive in this season of renewal. Ukrainian soldiers say that when planning combat operations, they take everything into account, right down to which road to take and what position the sun is in at that moment, so that it blinds the enemy in the eyes.
We take everything into account, the elevation map, and even the timing of the approach. For example, if the approach is in the evening, the sun is setting, and it shines right into the Russians' eyes. That means the drones can't see as well anymore, there's glare. Plus, if you drive along the tree line and the sun is on that side, then from a distance, when they look and zoom in along the tree line, it already looks like night, it's already dark.
Ukrainian sappers also spoke about their effective work. The soldiers noted that the enemy tried to break through the defense forces' positions, but got stuck in one of the minefields. Almost all the armored vehicles that the Russians sent into the assault were blown up.
The commander sends me all these videos and I tell him, well, it's working, isn't it? I say, see, it wasn't for nothing that I crawled around there setting all those mines, and that's awesome. In a short period of time, we destroyed 3 BTR-82s and 1 armored vehicle. There were also personnel there who were also eliminated. In my opinion, the operation was very effective.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, published a video showing the equally effective destruction of the logistics of Russian occupiers. He noted that thanks to the efforts of Ukrainian soldiers, the burnt Russian equipment and detonated ammunition never made it to the front lines.
Since the beginning of the year, Ukrainian soldiers have destroyed about 20,000 units of automotive equipment belonging to the Russian occupiers. These are thousands of tons of destroyed ammunition, equipment and fuel that the enemy never received. I thank the defenders, both men and women, for their professional and effective combat work. Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Facebook.
The front has exploded. A Russian war correspondent sounds the alarm. The Ukrainian armed forces have surrounded thousands of Russian soldiers. A loud act of revenge from the Ukrainian armed forces. Zelensky announced the Ukrainian armed forces struck 3 Iskander-M systems at once in the Bryansk region, which had been used to shell Kyiv, among other targets. This is a devastating blow to the aggressor. What is really happening at the front? Watch this.
This is the commander of an Iskander missile battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Oleg Podozerov, a Russian officer who tenderly poses with his daughter while at the same time cold-bloodedly launches missiles at Ukrainian children. Or rather, he used to launch them because during an attempted strike on Kyiv on June 5, an Iskander-M launcher was destroyed, along with its missiles and 14 killers who operated them. Half of those eliminated were officers, including Lieutenant Colonel Podozerov. The launcher that was destroyed by HIMARS had been deployed 40 kilometers from the border in the Bryansk region. The missile operators probably thought they were out of reach, but the impunity of war criminals has come to an end.
And to wage war, I believe that
the war needs to be brought onto their territory. After all, they keep pushing in. We need to go in there and break up their groups. Radik and his comrades from the Ari battalion are fighting right here in Tkino, a large settlement in the Kursk region. Ukrainian forces entered Tkino a few weeks ago. The fighting is still going on almost in the center of the settlement.
They're even shutting down their local public pages.
Even their local public pages and the military are spreading the word that Tkino is surrounded, that our troops are there and so on. This, along with all the events currently happening across the border, is having quite a positive effect on the overall situation. Among other things, they're being forced to pull in units here that weren't stationed in this area and that could have been sent to other directions to support offensive operations. But they have to pull them in here. The Russians are clinging to the industrial zone of Tkino. Infantrymen are attacking the enemy, engaging the Russians in close quarters combat. Ukrainian aviation is destroying enemy drone control points with precision-guided bombs. Our forces have secured positions in Tkino, including part of the Ukrainian Volunteer Army's Ray Battalion.
This is a strategically important object.
This is a strategically important site. Before we entered this village, they used 209 KABs against us over 4 days and still couldn't drive us out. They started deploying Pskov special forces against us. The area assault troops broke through to the railway bridge, and in another sector, several brave Ukrainians captured a large group of Russian prisoners.
9 people of them were...
There were 9 people there.
Not 9, there were 11, but 2 weren't brought out, because when we were already escorting the prisoners out, they noticed we were moving them. Well, their hands were tied, and they started finishing them off with FPV drones. 2 didn't survive, because they killed them. There was 1 officer.
There was 1 officer, and there were also special forces representatives. The task was to eliminate them before they could transmit any information.
When the Ukrainian soldiers were escorting us to their territory, our own artillery was actively firing at us. We were also hit by drones. I don't know if it was German drones or not, but something serious exploded really hard.
But they managed to get the officer out without a scratch. Now he and his subordinates are fattening up on Ukrainian sallow. The Russian officer is still surprised by the ingenuity of the Ukrainians, who, pretending to be Russians, captured the special forces soldiers.
Based on their approach to us from a distance, and what truly misled us in that moment was the fact that, based on their appearance and behavior, we genuinely believed they were members of our own group. That's it. And that's how we were taken prisoner.
Intelligence seems to be the only resource Ukrainians have in abundance. Where our soldiers act more cleverly than the enemy, the situation remains under control. A separate battalion of Unmanned Systems was recently created in the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade Edelweiss. Given the new conditions that have developed on this section of the front, this is simply a necessity. These are not direct firefights. These are not direct small arms battles, which, well, probably haven't happened for more than a year and a half now. Now, out of every 10 Russians killed, 9 are killed precisely by unmanned systems. The brigade has been holding the defense near Siversk for the 2nd year. For several weeks in a row, the Russians have been trying to encircle the city.
They are doing everything to cut off our logistics first and foremost, and of course to strike at the positions of the drone operators. These are their top priority targets right now. Of course, for our part, we have to take certain measures, build backup positions and lines of defense, so we can change the locations from which we operate.
This is one of those positions. The occupiers wouldn't hesitate to use even Iskanders on it if they find it, and here they fend off drones with a shotgun.
Enemy FPV kamikaze drones reach here. We don't trust electronic warfare, we only trust the pump.
From here we also use FPV drones against the enemy, but special ones. A simple solution for complex tasks. Darts are a kind of FPV drone, just with wings. They are used in particular to destroy enemy artillery. In other words, for so-called counter-battery warfare. It replaces Ukrainian long-range artillery guns. But just imagine, this entire bird costs 5 times less than a single artillery shell. Despite its primitive appearance, serious engineers worked on this drone. They created a cheap but effective weapon.
The wings are made of foam plastic. The main body is made of plywood.
They use a tandem charge against enemy equipment.
The shaped charge jet can penetrate any target up to 10 meters.
A few warm words for the enemy are written on the wings and the darts takes off into the sky. It can cover up to 50 kilometers, and if it locks onto a target, electronic warfare won't be able to stop it. Exactly what is needed in the Sivershchaina region.
Within a 35-kilometer radius, I honestly can't even remember the last time I saw any heavy equipment or a tank. We focus on logistics, on the movement of heavy equipment that is likely being prepared for future assaults.
Here, in the dart's camera lens, is an enemy armored vehicle. The final phase of the flight, and the drones automatically lock onto the target. The crew of the armored vehicle realizes what's happening and scatters just seconds before the darts turns it into a firework. Ammunition for the darts is prepared here, in an underground workshop that serves the entire battalion of Unmanned Systems.
Cumulative action ammunition.
Today, winged FPVs are effective, but tomorrow they might lose all relevance. The drone laboratory in the Unmanned Systems battalion is forced to respond to changes much faster than the manufacturers of wings or quadcopters.
Nothing can be universal. The Russians also always want to counter us. They find ways to jam us, they figure out our control. So it works for a while. In 2 or 3 months it will no longer work. That means we have to come up with something new again.
The new thing doesn't necessarily have to fly. This is the area around the village of Dvorichna in the Kharkiv region. Here, the 8th Battalion of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade is holding the defense. The enemy crossed to the right bank of the Oskil River and captured part of Dvorichna. They are trying to establish a bridgehead, and from that bridgehead begin to encircle Kupiansk. Are they making any progress or not? Has the line stopped moving?
No, the line has stopped. The guys are holding their positions both in the village and around it.
Delivering food, ammunition and medical supplies to the defenders of Dvorichna is extremely dangerous. The crew of this pickup miraculously survived after hitting a shaped charge.
The main thing is that everyone is alive.
The drone looks like a kind of multi-tool on tracks. Cargo delivery, evacuation of the dead and wounded, setting up barriers and even laying mines. There's a separate module for each task.
We drive the vehicle and set up minefields. That means neither sappers nor engineers have to go out to the front line. We handle logistics, delivered water and provisions. Now they're unloading.
How far can you actually travel right now?
There and back 10 kilometers. It's practically a drone war now, both aerial and ground drones. First and foremost, preserving lives.
A robot saves the life of an infantryman, but it can't replace him. Wars are won by people. Ukraine holds its ground where the infantry stands.
World War III has begun. Israel will kill Iran's leader. Trump urges people to flee. While the Middle East is exploding, Russia has unleashed hundreds of drones and missiles on Ukraine. But the Ukrainian armed forces responded instantly. Russia's losses will surprise you. Putin urgently sent Shoigu to North Korea. What will he be begging for? All the details are in the plot.
Russia is under attack. Explosions have rocked the Tambov region. The likely target of the attack may have been the Progress plant, which specializes in producing control systems for aviation and missile technology. After the arrival of a UAV, yet another major chemical plant of Russia's military-industrial complex in the Stavropol region has halted operations. The enterprise Nevinomysky Azot produces substances that can be used in the manufacture of munitions and rocket fuel. But it's not just Russia that's burning, and Blazingso is the front line. In the Donetsk region, Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian Grad multiple rocket launcher loaded with shells containing chemical weapons. Another operation was carried out by border guards near Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian armed forces detected and destroyed 2 enemy vehicles, 2 Murom-M long-range visual surveillance systems and a communications antenna. In addition, mortar crews and drone operators from the Scorpion unit shelled the occupiers' strongholds. Despite these successful operations, the situation at the front remains difficult. The Russians are trying to encircle Kostiantynivka from 3 directions.
Donetsk direction. A sharp escalation of the situation in the area of Derivka with the aim of further advancing towards Kostiantynivka. In the Pokrovsk direction, fierce fighting is taking place near the Malinivka junction. Unfortunately, the occupiers have achieved certain tactical successes, and the main focus of the occupying forces will not even be to create a threat of operational encirclement in the Pokrovsk direction with the aim of advancing towards Mirnorod and Dobropilia and further to the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. but rather to advance specifically toward Kostiantynivka.
Also, according to deep state analysts, the enemy has advanced in the Donetsk and Sumy regions.
The occupiers have achieved a number of tactical successes in the Sumy region as well. This refers to advances in the area of the settlement of Yablonivka, with the threat once again of blocking the Ukrainian Defense Forces units concentrated in Yunakivka. And accordingly, there are certain tactical successes in the Donetsk direction. This concerns the advance of occupying forces in the area of the settlements of Komar and Zaporizhia. This is in the Pavlovsk direction.
At the same time, the occupiers may soon face problems with their stockpiles of tanks and armored vehicles. According to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, these may last only until the end of the current year at most.
At the moment, the capabilities of the Russian Federation's military-industrial complex to produce the latest models of armored vehicles are limited to around 150 to 200 units. This amount is not sufficient given the level of losses of heavy armored vehicles in the Russian occupation army. The only way to replenish heavy armor is to demothball long-term storage depots. According to Western intelligence communities, there are about 3,500 to 4,000 units of heavy armored vehicles left in long-term storage depots.
According to intelligence agencies, this amount of equipment will be enough for the occupiers to conduct active combat operations until 2026. Meanwhile, fierce shelling continues between Israel and Iran. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not rule out that during IDF military operations, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei could be killed. The Israeli Prime Minister is convinced that his elimination could bring an end to, rather than escalate, the war between Israel and Iran.
If rocket attacks on Israel intensify, Israel reserves the right to immediately strike Iran's gas and oil refining facilities. This would deal a serious blow to the Republic's ability to conduct foreign economic activity and to keep the Iranian economy in a relatively stable condition, significantly.
Meanwhile, the US president has called on everyone to evacuate from the Iranian capital, Tehran. But the hellish night is not only in Iran and Israel. Russia launched more than 440 drones and 32 missiles at Ukraine. Residential buildings were destroyed and dozens of people were killed and wounded. Is this how dictator Putin wants peace? By the way, Donald Trump stated that if Russia had been kept in the gate, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine could have been avoided.
Shocking! Putin is rushing to play peacemaker in the Middle East, trying to distract attention from the horrors of the war in Ukraine. And although Trump, who clearly sympathizes with him, responded favorably to this idea, European leaders erupted in protest against such a cynical manipulation. Will this bloody criminal manage to pose as a peacemaker in order to launder his reputation? All the shocking details are in the report.
The dove of peace is not what it used to be. Now, it's not leaders with spotless reputations who want to become peacemakers, but murderers, sociopaths, and dictators. To be more precise, Putin. The Russian president decided he wanted to act as a mediator between Israel and Iran. The situation is surreal, but Donald Trump liked the idea. The American president said that he would be open to possible mediation by the Kremlin's master and that Putin himself is ready for it.
His main task is to keep stringing Trump along so that he can actually be useful to him, and in this way he hopes to influence not only the situation in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, but also perhaps even more significantly in the escalating Iran-Israel conflict. Trump believes him. Trump thinks that Putin can help him. But in reality, Putin and Trump have completely different views on this situation and, let's say, on the benefits involved. In fact, it's not just that their views are different, they're actually opposite.
But Trump stubbornly refuses to notice this. In the eyes of the American president, it seems Putin is a pacifist. But Europe knows the true value of the Russian dictator's words. In particular, French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken out against Putin's mediation. He pointed out that there is not enough trust in Russia for that.
If anyone understands this, it's Macron who communicated with Putin directly for a long time and knows that Putin deceives, he doesn't even bluff. He knows perfectly well that he won't be able to do anything in Iran, that no one there will listen to him. And that's because there are two sides in this conflict, Israel and Iran. Israel has its own objectives, and until it achieves them or hits some kind of wall, it won't stop.
So, being a mediator right now makes no sense at all. But Trump is not satisfied with this state of affairs.
Here, once again, it comes down not so much to Putin or his wishes, but rather to Trump's illusions who can't cope. He has no victories. He needs to close this case at any cost. I mean, the Middle Eastern one, and in this situation, he's ready to turn away from Ukraine just to achieve at least some result.
Putin, on the other hand, has different goals. He doesn't crave to be a peacemaker, but he wants everyone to think so. And this, in turn, will help the bloody dictator return to global politics.
He is returning to the geopolitical map as a peacemaker. And in this way, he diverts attention from the war he is waging in Ukraine. And of course, he is also buying time, because sooner or later, it will become clear that he's not much of a peacemaker. In reality, he's an international terrorist. It would be astonishing if back in the day, bin Laden had been invited to solve some serious geopolitical problems.
Another reason is the sanctions. It's beneficial for Putin to string Trump along. After all, as long as the Russian dictator is seen as a peacemaker in the eyes of the American president, there won't be any restrictions. As a result, Russia gains at least several months.
This would be a very serious blow to the credibility of everyone currently fighting for peace in Ukraine. In fact, if Putin goes from being a pariah to being seen as a peacemaker, even a nominal one, that's very bad, honestly. It's a dangerous precedent.
And calling it bad is actually an understatement. Because if Putin can broker peace between other countries while still encroaching on Ukrainian territory, what would stop other dictators from attacking their neighbors for land? After all, in the end, nothing will happen to them. They won't remain outcasts. And in this situation, all we can do is hope for Trump's good sense. But with each passing day, that hope becomes more and more elusive.
That's all for now. For more breaking news from the front lines, tune in to our next episode.